Last but not least, certainly, Harry C. Veryser is adjunct instructor here at the University of Detroit Mercy. He has served as director of the graduate program at the University of Detroit Mercy and past chairman of the Department of Economics and Finance at Welsh College. He is also a former businessman who owned a successful Detroit-based automotive supply company. Professor Veryser is an associate scholar of the Ludwig von Mises Institute and serves on the advisory boards of the Mackinac Center for Public Policy and the Acton Institute for the Study of Religion and Liberty. In 2003, Professor Veryser was a recipient of the prestigious Will Herberg Award for Outstanding Faculty Service from the Intercollegiate Studies Institute, ISI. A graduate of the University of Detroit, Professor Veryser's recent book entitled "It Didn't Have to Be This Way: Why Boom and Bust is Unnecessary and How the Austrian School of Economics Breaks the Cycle," sounds like an 18th century title to me, was a runaway bestseller in 2012. He is currently working on a new book on the common good. Professor Veryser this morning will be speaking on the New Silk Road. Professor Harry C. Veryser.
Now those of you who know this will be rather fast because I want to have some time for questions for the other members. But in any event, I want to talk about the Silk Road as being one of the major structural changes that I see happening in the economy for, say, the next 100 years. And when we talked about the Silk Road is, let's see if this is, okay, there's a little. Oh, okay. Yeah. Let's see if we can get this thing to function if I can get this. Okay. At the beginning of the 1890s, a fellow wrote a book on, which had a tremendous influence. His name was Captain Mann, and he wrote a book, The Influence of Sea Power in History, Securing International Markets. And the thesis of my talk is, I think we're looking at a change in that paradigm from actually a sea-based power, which was England and the United States, to a land-based railroad power. And so he, so I get this right, Alfred Thayer Mann wrote the book, had tremendous influence on geopolitical policy, especially with England and Great Britain during that period of time. It influenced Germany's Kaiser to build navies. Great Britain, the same, and these are the number of leaders, certainly had an influence in getting us into the Spanish-American War, the Panama Canal, and the seizure of the Spanish Empire, the annexation of Hawaii. The idea was that having a strong navy, having coaling and supply ports around the world would allow one to control the seas, and therefore you could open up markets, etc. What I see happening today is that a change has happened with the fall of Iraq. It opened up a power vacuum and created a power vacuum into which Russia and Iran moved into Syria, and China decided to go back to an ancient strategy, which was the Silk Road. And it followed the old trading patterns. The Chinese interest is to open up markets. 50% of the Chinese population is in agriculture, and those people are moving out of agriculture, about 19 million a year, which means to create stability in China, the Chinese economy must open up new positions in its economy, and its strategy has been to do what? To go into manufacturing and to create jobs for its people by expanding the markets. China is dealing with a very unbalanced economy. If you take a look at this, and the blue part is the high income areas. As you move west, the poverty in China increases markedly. So what you have is you have an economy of very prosperous but small group, a very large group in poverty, and those people are looking to get out of that. They want to get out of subsistence farming. They want to get into other jobs. And so China has adopted the strategy of expanding the Silk Road and expanding markets. Okay? Will the Silk Road change history? This is a map of the Silk Road around 1800. These were the major trading routes. It's very interesting that a friend of mine, a priest, was reading one of the church fathers around 300, and he writes in his thesis or his thing that about the women in Greece actually using Chinese silk to make garments. In other words, that Silk Road has been going on for probably about 2,500 years, the trade between China and the West. And it's, the Chinese government now has said, look, we'll revive that Silk Road. And this is an outline of what they're looking to do. In other words, where it took years and years to move goods and services, they're putting in high-speed rail, and they have it called One Belt, One Strategy. So the concept was to revive these old trading routes, which I showed you before. This was the old trading route, okay? But develop markets for Chinese products, to open up access to natural resources. 75% of the world's natural resources lie along the Silk Road. 75% of the natural resources, let me repeat it, lie along that railroad track or along that Silk Road. The idea is it would prevent disruption of supply lines by sea by having an alternative land route. And the Chinese government, if you read what their people are saying in their own papers, they say we are using soft power markets to influence world affairs. Okay? This is why the Chinese are all nervous about the South China Sea, because a tremendous amount of 40% of the world's commerce is going through that South China Sea. China looks at it as a national interest, as a very, very primary natural interest, because that's where their trade is going, to go to Africa, India, and through the Indian Ocean. So in a sense, we have to realize that if we're dealing with that, we're dealing with a very sensitive part, and it's going to take some very good diplomacy to work out a freedom of the seas deal so that they don't have to worry about that. But they're saying if we have to worry about it, we got the railroad. Okay? Railroads' influence on history. Railroads built the following countries by opening up development and markets. You take the Transcontinental Railway of the United States. I remember talking with a British fellow during one of the campaigns. He was interviewing us, and he said, when you guys drove that Golden Spike through Promontory Point, Utah, you drove a spike through the British Empire, the heart of the British Empire, because now the United States became a two-ocean power. Before that, it took months to cross. With railways, it was a matter of days. And so that made us a two-ocean power. Canada often laughs and said we were the country built by a railroad. And of course it was the Canadian Pacific Railroad that was built actually to move troops in case the Americans invaded. They were worried about that. So they said, well, we'll build a railroad we can get red alerts through the country. The Russian railroads unified Russia. Russia was a very, very poor area, and it was the building of the railroads really that made Russia a major power and able to fight World War I. Okay? This is the Chinese strategy. They'll build that Silk Road. Notice it goes to Europe. By the way, I think it was last month, the first train arrived in London from China. Okay? They're also moving very quickly into Africa, and they've told, I have a nephew who's in Tanzania. The Chinese have told the Tanzanians, we'll build the railroads, but we own the railroads and we maintain the railroads. And there are tremendous investments in Africa. Why? Natural resources. And if you could take a look at it, the South China Sea also goes to the South Pacific. So that's a very key point. And I think to maintain world peace, it's going to take some, as I said, some pretty good diplomacy, hopefully the art of the deal, to do that. Okay, this is from Hong Kong. the Maritime Silk Road. It shows you various ways, various areas. And notice, if you take a look at it, one of the key points that they have, this is again one belt, one road. They have the economic belt, which is the railroad. The red is the maritime route. And it's very interesting. One of the ports that they intend to go to is Venice, Italy. Who left Venice, Italy? Marco Polo. So does things change? Well, maybe, right? But they're looking at Venice, where the original Silk Road ended up, as a new point of being able to bring goods and services in. Notice that China also has recently put naval bases at the beginning of the Red Sea. They're looking at the Red Sea as being a major transport area. Okay, this is where they went into Afghanistan. Now look, we've been fighting in Afghanistan, 15 years. The Chinese don't have any soldiers there. They have a railroad. That was just completed. 44,600 miles. The train cuts the travel time from China to Afghanistan from 6 months to 2 weeks to be able to transport. Now what that's going to do is that's going to open up markets. They're not interested in military things. They're interested in trade. Okay, and Afghanistan has, guess what? Lots of copper and other natural resources that the Chinese are going to open up. The second one is Pakistan. Okay, it's an economic corridor. The Chinese are now building railroads and building pipelines through Pakistan, and they're talking about soft power, market power, power of trade. Okay, again, this is another route. I think it's a little bit more open. Trains are actually, as we talk, arriving in Europe from China. And they'll be able to, I think, compete in the transoceanic market because they can land goods in China and ship them to Europe instead of going by ship, which is much longer. The railroad will go about 2 weeks, okay, which will open up a market for them. Okay, the question, can the Chinese emphasis on markets bring a modicum of peace to the Mideast? And they're betting, and I'm betting, that I know a lot of Americans are nervous about China, but think of it. If they get these people trading and they get them interested in markets, perhaps there'll be a diminution of the type of violence in the Mideast as they switch from deciding to blow each other up to making products and selling. Okay? And it could have a tremendous civilizing effect on the world if it's handled right. So I'm thinking that we're going to have a switch now from sea power, okay, to land power. Trade will be conducted over land by rail, high-speed rail, and hopefully as they open up these markets, now remember, Say's law is what? You got to have prosperous customers to buy things. So it's in China's interest to develop markets all the way through the Asian corridor. I don't think China will pass the United States, at least not in my lifetime or in yours, but I think it can have a tremendously stabilizing effect in the Mideast, and I look forward to that if it's done by trade. Because they're not moving soldiers, they're moving goods and services, and that's a good sign. Thank you.